Well, let's get started with this morning's Dharma in Pyjamas. So good morning, and very glad that you're all here. And the topic for today is, well, why should I wear a face mask? Because it's been quite a topical thing recently. And I wanted to investigate what the Buddhist take on wearing a face mask is. And I'm not sure if you've ever had the thought, why should I wear a face mask? Or perhaps the aversion towards wearing a face mask. And, you know, so many people don't like it. And I really started thinking, well, why? Why don't we like it? I mean, there's the obvious ones of we feel muzzled, and feeling muzzled like an animal, you know, it's quite disconcerting and degrading. There's the obvious ones of that it's harder to breathe. We can't breathe. It's itchy. It hurts our ears, especially if we wear glasses and then we have it around our ears as well. It's super inconvenient. It's very difficult to communicate when we have half of our face obscured. And literally what it is, when we put on a mask, it's literally like rubbing our faces in it. And what we're rubbing our faces in is our helplessness. And I think this is why we have such a strong visceral reaction of aversion and even repulsion towards wearing a face mask. That when we put a mask on, it's literally in our face, our helplessness about the virus, about whether we live or die, whether we get sick or not, our common human condition. And most of the time we can push that aside. It's not in our face. But by putting a mask on, it is literally in our face. And so this happens at a much deeper level than an intellectual level. It's deep and instinctual. By putting on a face mask, it literally embodies our helplessness in the face of not just COVID, but all of samsara. It shows we have no control and that we have to live with something that we dislike. And so every ounce of our being just goes, no, I don't want to do it. And it's as if by putting on the mask, it's a sign of capitulation that we've given in, you know, it's a sign of weakness, that we've finally given in to the new reality. And none of us want this to be the new normal, do we? That fills us with dread. What if it's always going to be like this from now on and all those wonderful days are gone? So just by putting on a mask, it brings all of this up. It also reminds us of death and impermanence, doesn't it? So why are we putting on a mask? Because we don't want to die. I mean, that's usually our first kind of thought of why we put one on. And so, of course, it's not even just a response of dislike. It's actually a response of repulsion. We are repulsed by death and disease. And biologically, it's built in that way because it keeps us safe. We keep away from death and disease so that we don't, you know, get exposed to contagion. But in terms of putting on a face mask, then all of this happens just by this one simple action, and we're not necessarily aware of it. But it's why then in the news and in our community, we have such a strong reaction to even the thought of having to wear face masks. So the Buddhist take on wearing a face mask. If you remember that story, just when we're talking about how, you know, all sentient beings want happiness and no one wants suffering. No one even wants just a small feeling of a thorn in one's thumb or one's toe. Even just a small thing like that can become unbearable. And this is actually what happens, that when we focus on our suffering, it becomes all-encompassing. But if we think of the benefits then we can start changing our instinctual response. Our whole experience changes. So instead of just having a splinter in one's thumb going, oh, I can't bear it, I can't bear it. If we think of the benefits of having a little pinprick, for instance, if you've ever had acupuncture or you've ever had an anesthetic needle, very horrible experience, like, you know, getting an anesthetic needle when you go to the dentist. But we don't think necessarily about that horrible experience, or if we do, then we just don't go to the dentist, do we? But what we think about is the benefits of anesthetic. And that gets us through. It changes the experience. With acupuncture, we think of the benefits of that little pinprick, and it gets us through. And actually, we can relax our mind by thinking of the benefits until it can actually almost, say with acupuncture, become a pleasurable experience. We can have the sensation of it working. So it's just by changing our attitude from going, no, I can't bear it, to remembering the benefits. So how do we remember the benefits of a face mask? Well, for instance, the first responders, you know, the front liners, as we call them, the doctors and the nurses wearing PPE for hours and hours. You know, they get bruised noses, they get really sore ears, they get rashes all over their face because of the humidity, and yet they go through this day after day after day because they want to protect. They want to protect us. They want to protect themselves, and they're thinking of the benefits, and that way they make the sacrifice. There's a really nice touch too of, you know, how we feel so kind of homogenized when we're wearing a mask, who's who. And so those photographs in ICU where everyone just looks like they're dressed up like aliens, don't they? And so then the nurses take a photo of themselves and pin it to the front. So there's a nice smiling face right at the heart area, you know, whilst you're covered in all of these masks and things like that. So we can humanize it. So as a Buddhist, wearing a face mask can actually be a practice of non-harm. It is literally non-harm. We're refraining from harming others. And by refraining from harming others, we're also protected. So this is one of the first things about wearing a face mask, is that mostly it protects other people, which is great, isn't it? It also can protect us, especially the better mask that we have, the more protected we are. But basically, it really shows our interdependence, doesn't it? That if all of us act to protect others, we have a safe society. So non-harm. It took me ages to get my head around what non-harm even was, because it's a non-thing, isn't it? It's a not doing anything. How does that count? What even is it? But this is a really clear example, isn't it? Physical distancing, wearing a mask, washing your hands, all of those things. We're not overtly helping others, but we are literally practicing non-harm. And that is a wonderful thing to do. And we can do that with this real care for all sentient beings. As a Mahayana Buddhist, it's even more. Not only is it non-harm, but it's cherishing others. It's actually practicing a generosity of giving protection, of saving lives. So out of the three types of generosity, you know, sharing our things, giving protection, saving lives, and giving the Dharma. So, you know, this one, how often do we get to save lives? Not that often, but just by putting on a face mask, we can be literally saving lives. So practicing that generosity of protecting not just the vulnerable, but everybody. And it can be a practice of literally embodying the bodhisattva ideal. How physically practicing it with body, speech, and mind. So I'm going to demonstrate. Here we have my face mask. And as we put it on, we can think, oh, okay, I am going to embody my bodhicitta attitude, not just lip service. So as I'm covering my lips, I'm going to be thinking, I'm not just giving lip service to being on the bodhisattva path, I'm going to practice it. And then as we hook it around our ears, so the left ear, we hook it around wisdom. May I develop all the wisdom wing. And the right side, compassion. May I develop the compassion wing. So we put them on like that. Then we remember, as people often say, you know, it's really important to listen rather than speak. So we've got our ears primed to hear the cries of other sentient beings. And then I'm also giving not just the generosity of protecting lives, I'm also giving the generosity of the Dharma, because I've used my mask as an educational opportunity. So I was trying to think, what can I do just really short? So as a volunteer, I thought the best thing would be to just write welcome on the front. And then here, I don't want to be preaching, so I'm not saying cherish others, I'm saying cherishing others. That's what I'm trying to do. And it might give people pause, who knows? Or maybe I've spelt it wrong and they're just looking at that, I don't know. So we've covered our mouth, and when we cover our mouth, then we can think right speech, isn't it? I'm going to watch my speech in particular and make sure that what I say is motivated by bodhicitta. And the fact that we have a little bit of difficulty breathing is a very good thing, because it makes us mindful about our speech. And we put it on physically, so we're watching our physical actions. And then if we have difficulty with breathing, then we can use it as a Tonglen practice. That just by me not being able to breathe, may others be able to do so. And in fact, what we can do is, if you have tantric vows, you can even use it not just for the Buddhist vows and the Mahayana vows, but the tantric vows. You know, in Guru Puja, when we, or Chocho, when we retake the tantric vows, and right at the end it says, I will deliver those not delivered, liberate those not liberated, give breath to those unable to breathe, and place all beings in a state beyond sorrow. So when we put on our mask and we can't breathe properly, we can think, may we help others breathe. And then when we take it off, then again, we practice mindfulness. And so we're thinking, may none of my actions ever harm others. May none of my disturbing emotions ever harm others, and may they never be contagion amongst others. So it's like a purification process, isn't it? That just like we purify so that our negativities don't snowball and become bigger, when we take off our mask, we're very mindful that we don't become contagious to everybody else, and we dispose of it properly. So there's your purification practice right there. So isn't that amazing? Just in this one tiny little action. So then, instead of it becoming a chore or something that we dislike, we can use our thought transformation to take that dislike and renew our determination on the Dharma path. Because so many times Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, you know, if we're not remembering death and impermanence, if we don't remember death, we can't practice Dharma. So by putting on this mask and feeling that repulsion, that intense aversion, it is literally helping us remember death. Not just intellectually, but literally in your face, death in your face. And this is absolutely fantastic for a Buddhist. It's like life hacking for a Buddhist. So we put on a mask, we remember death and impermanence. And then everything that we do, it's not worldly anymore, is it? It's thinking about what happens next. Not just this life, not just a materialistic life, but what happens next, and am I ready for death? Because how come I feel such revulsion towards death anyway? Clearly, because I'm not ready. If I was a really good tantric practitioner, I would be thinking, fantastic, there's my great opportunity. I'm ready, let's go. Whenever it happens, fantastic. But the fact that we have this aversion towards it, or that, well, at least I do, is that I'm not ready. So it's like taking your temperature. It's a spiritual thermometer right there. How ready are we to meet our death? Am I ready today? Clearly not. Better work at it some more. So instead of becoming an inconvenience, it's a reminder. And actually, the mask is an inconvenience because we don't want to remember death and impermanence. It's not the mask itself that's the inconvenience. It's that feeling, isn't it? And so once we recognize that it's not in the mask, it's not the thing out there that's causing the problem. The thing out there is mirroring what's going on in our mind. And how wonderful to be able to see it, to catch it right there. Because so many times we just smooth it all through, don't we? Because we're intellectually, we can do that. But now this is really where the rubber hits the road. So, you know, from remembering death, then finally now we're on a spiritual path. Then what we do doesn't have to be corrupted by the worldly concerns, the unstable worldly concerns. Everything that we do will be with this remembrance of is this even worthwhile in the face of life and death? So the wonderful thing too about, you know, wearing masks or anything like this is just on a worldly level, it's incredibly effective. I noticed this when I go to the supermarket wearing a mask, everyone stays away from me. This is a good thing. It's good on a worldly level, but it's also good for my ego. So again, we can use that, can't we? That instead of taking it personally and craving everybody liking us all the time, including complete strangers on the supermarket aisle, when they recoil from you, notice, wow, what's happening emotionally here? That in itself is excellent boot camp. So, you know, you don't have to take it personally. Your ego gets whittled down a little bit. But in the big scheme of things, this is great. I'm protecting myself and I'm protecting others. So there was a guy in Italy that did a study about this, how effective wearing face masks were just for physical distancing. So Italians, you know, very, very touchy-feely. I can't imagine how much they're just like their society is completely turned upside down, that you can't kiss everyone on the cheek how many times when you meet them. So he got some of these people to wear these belts with a sensor in the belts that could tell how close people were to you or not. And so then the people wearing the face masks or the people not wearing the face masks. So he found in Italy, when the lockdown happened and you know, people were only allowed out to go to the shops and back again, you know, for those essential things, that when they would pass themselves in the street, just because they were missing human company so much, people would just walk much closer to each other as they passed by, without having any awareness that that was happening. Because we just crave that human interaction. And I remember when the lockdown first happened in Brisbane, we're all standing there in reception at the Lungery Tumpa Centre talking about this lockdown, but we're all in a huddle. We're in this huge room, but we're all really close together, instinctually gathering together like that. Anyway, so this guy in Italy, then he had the people wear the masks walking down the street and with their sensor belt on. And of course, if you're wearing a mask, people would veer away from you. So the mask helps for physical distancing. It reminds people, and it reminds people that it's not normal at the moment. So it's inconvenient, but it's really useful. Because if I go to the supermarket without a mask and no one else has a mask, I'm not that focused. I just forget. You know, we just revert back to habit. And then, of course, then it's too late. If someone's walking around asymptomatic, it's too late. Wearing a mask also helps us to remember not to touch our face. That's the other thing too, isn't it? Because we're always going, oh, it doesn't work. So it helps us with that kind of mindfulness. And I mean, the other good thing too about wearing a mask is that, of course, we should wear them properly, and especially if we're in an environment where, you know, we're working with infected people. But just out generally, all the studies have shown that even if you just have a one-layer mask and you put it on wrong, it's still way more effective than none because of all these other things that happen. And because the main thing about wearing a mask is we are protecting others from us. So, you know, it's definitely something is better than nothing. And all the various countries where they've had wearing a mask just out in public, you know, a lot of the Malaysian countries and things, Asian countries, where people are used to it, it's like 80% less contagion because of protecting the group like that. But of course, all of these reasons aren't enough if emotionally we're still recoiling. So that's why it's so important that as a Buddhist, we really find the deep meaning in it. And then we can use it as part of our path to enlightenment. So probably the last thing that I wanted to say was that it can really help then also to clean up our karma. Because I was thinking, what's the karmic story that is happening here? And just taking Australia, that, you know, I might have mentioned before, there's an ad on telly about Australians caring for each other. That's what we do. We're always there caring for our mates, looking out for each other. We're all in this together. I can't remember what the ad was. It's some like insurance ad or something, and it's just telling this wonderful story how Australians are always there for each other in an emergency. And it's just not true, is it? I mean, our culture hasn't looked after the vulnerable. In fact, it completely neglects the vulnerable. Childcare workers, so low paid. Aged care, insecure work, low paid. You know, working conditions in hospitals. So these really essential caring for others jobs, we neglect all the people that do it and disregard them. And it's a real low status kind of job. And now, karmically, we find ourselves unable to connect with our children, with our aged, with the sick because of the virus. So karmically, you know, when we look at the karmic results of things, the most heavy kind of result is where we're born, you know, the rebirth that we take, whether we take birth as a human being, a fortunate life, or as an animal, pretty much less fortunate, as an insect or a fish, even worse, you know, less fortune. So that's the big karmic result. But then there are the other karmic results of what happens to us in that life that we have. So here we are, a human being. We're in Australia, which is a pretty charmed place to be compared to the rest of the world. But what happens to us in this life in terms of how we act and the experiences that we have. So kind of our personality, how we go about in the world, and what happens to us. And then we have the environmental result that's largely shared amongst us. So in terms of what's happening to us now, where really a lot of us individuals are experiencing the result of having neglected others, neglected our loved ones. Now we cannot see them. We can't go see them in the aged care home. We can't hold their hand when they're dying. So, and you know, the young kids, how are they going to socialize? How are they going to like flirt with each other when they can't even see each other? I mean, it just breaks my heart. I can't even imagine growing up in a time like this. So this is a karmic result of having neglected those very ones, the vulnerable. And then we have the environmental result shared amongst us. So if we really want to do something about this pandemic, we have to work on the karmic causes as well as everything else. So we've got to work on finding a vaccine and a cure and the best preventative measures and be really smart about it all. And then make sure that all of these things can actually work. And what makes them work is changing our karma. When we have those internal conditions lined up, when we do that internal purification, then it clears the way for these external things to become successful. If we don't do that internal work, it doesn't matter how good those external things are, they're not going to work, or it won't last very long. So this is actually something where instead of feeling helpless, now we as Buddhists have a crucial job, which is to clean up our karma. And you know, we can do this in our mind. We can have the attitude we're doing it for everybody, and then it becomes very powerful. Becomes, you know, it can become a bodhicitta motivation, not just a personal one. And so then when we put on our mask, cherishing others, instead of it being an inconvenience, it can remind us we're cleaning up our karma. By going through this inconvenience, it reminds us we're already in this situation. So I hope I've put out some kind of things to consider and discuss. I hope I've convinced you that this can be such an incredibly worthwhile practice. Just a tiny little action like this, cherishing others, that we can really look forward to it. And then, you know, we can embody, I put on my wisdom, put on my skillful means, and then with our communication, we can do like secular mudras, isn't it? It's like, hello, welcome, hang on a second, I don't know, not sure, so nice to see you. All of these things. So here we are when we're doing our various pujas, doing the tantric mudras. It's a way of actually having the chi flow through our body, of unifying body, speech, and mind so that they become bigger than the parts. And so when we find that we can't communicate as clearly with our face muzzled, we can actually use it to start embodying those mudras of caring for others, helping others, literally expressing our care. So that in itself can be incredibly helpful. So thank you so much for your attention. Dharma in Pyjamas today, food for thought. I was going to put practicing non-harm, cherishing others, and welcome. If you come up with any other ones, please let me know. So let's dedicate our efforts this morning. Thank you so much for attending, and by all the effort that we put in, may we quickly be able to overcome this pandemic and come out the other side with a far better, more caring, wise society.